Okay, I think we started. AJ Alavari will hopefully be joining soon. He's stuck on an important call helping somebody. And let's work through uh, these ideas about, is capitalism fair or is it bad? And I'm going to come at it from an Islamic angle, which is, I would say, different to the socialists or the capitalists. Is somewhere in between capitalist sort of idea, and I'm going to explain it from a logical, not just from an Islamic point of view, but support it with logic and science and psychology and things like that. So I like this picture that I've got for the thumbnail. It says a lot of things that need to be answered. You can see there's a boat, it represents America. And like in America, you have this thing called meritocracy, which supposedly means the people who should win because of their effort win. Okay, but it's a very simplistic idea because it doesn't measure everything. It just measures, I suppose it measures your effort, but it doesn't consider where you started from and things like that. So is it really fair? Um, but it also shows, asks an important question: is like, um, besides it being fair, it doesn't really look fair, does it? Like you got the workers who do most of the hard work, and they're the majority, and they have hardly any money, next to no money, and a few people will have a lot of money. And I'll talk about why that actually is quite natural, that a few people in a let's say meritocratic system where people just work for money, there are always a few people who are more hardworking, more fortunate as well because of where they started off from. Um, but not even that, because there's a lot of people who simply more hardworking, um, apply themselves more. It's going uphill is more rare than going downhill. Let's just say so. It's more rare to be working hard, have more grit, than not to. It's easier to complain and say it's not fair, and therefore also not be particularly successful or make particularly much money. I don't want to say success is can only be measured by money. So um, let's say just making money. So we're going to talk about, is it fair? Is it bad? Is it stable? We can see that this picture quite accurately does describe a situation where if you have money in only a few hands, um, the vast majority of people are going to be unhappy, and that could destabilize society, can have riots and things like that. And also, does it make people happy? That's an important question. Is this really a good system that we should stick to? Will most people be happier this way? Maybe it encourages people to work hard, but maybe it puts value on people unfairly, like doesn't really count for where they started from. Sometimes you go through a bad patch, and if society only looks at people according to how much money they have, then people feel bad about themselves and they're more likely to be suicidal, which is what you find in the West, where people are measured by how much they have, more than family connections and things like that, and being nice. Because generally the West is more individualistic, and Eastern countries are often more, or maybe warmer countries that tend to be more community, or social based. So that's just some of the ideas um, I'm interested in discussing in this. So let's start with a definition. I'm not too concerned about the definition because many people have different definitions of capitalism. But why not? I asked, why not start with something and discuss even that definition? So Google said, when I did a quick search for capitalism, it says an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry is controlled by private owners for profit. There's a bit I agree with and a bit I disagree with. So there's something you can objectively see, which is that it allows private ownership. But there's a subjective reason for why people do it. Let's get rid of the double T there. And to claim that people only trade for profit, I would disagree, because there's a lot of people, some of the biggest capitalists, risk all their money just because it's the right thing to do. And for example, Elon Musk, one of the richest people, considered, you could say he's one of the biggest capitalists in the world at the moment. Basically said there was very little chance that there would be any profit in any of his ventures, in any of his businesses. So there's a good argument to say that profit is not the only motive for people in a capitalistic society. And I'd say psychologically, it's true. We're not built just for profit. We're very meaningful people. We need meaning to be happy. So it doesn't make sense that profit is the only value just because the only value you might have just because you happen to be born in such a system. Anyway, and what are the alternatives? So in short, I would agree that capitalism means you're allowed to own things. What's the alternative to that? Well, you've got communism, which says somebody else will own your stuff. Okay, and this historically has been horrendous, causing mass starvation. And the reason for that is that it's actually too complicated for, without money and individual ownership, for a few people, let's call it the communist government or whatever, to know who should get what. It's actually very complicated, because who should get silicon chips, for example? Should it be just anybody? Should it be everybody? Or should it be the people who studied it the most and whatever? And just studying it the most without practical experience might not be good, so it's not easy to measure these things. But the reason why capitalism doesn't suffer from this problem is you got money democracy. So money in the hands of everybody allows people to essentially vote, say like, we're going to buy your products, Nvidia for example, they're some sort of gaming chip manufacturer company. And therefore we're voting for you to do more of your good work because we like your products work. Yeah, so there's a money democracy that people don't realize. In a capitalistic system, it's a democratic system essentially in many ways. It's not perfect, I'm not saying that. There's another alternative that a lot of people like, that and these are people who I would say like to complain rather than have real solutions, and this is called anarchy. Okay, and essentially anarchy means no rules, and it's like telling car drivers, don't worry about traffic lights, drive in any direction, backwards, forwards, sideways on the road, and hopefully be fine. In fact, anarchists will say it will be fine. Human nature will tell us it will be perfectly fine, but we know that's a really bad idea. Okay, but people come up with these silly ideas that nobody's going to be bothered to try to disprove because it's such a bad idea, right? But why do people do that? Because people often want to scapegoat capitalism, to say it's not fair, it's not right, we just quit, and all this kind of stuff. But I don't want to just hate on people anarchists. Sometimes they're coming from a good place, but they don't really know alternative solutions, and which is what this is about. Islam has a much better practical solution than just giving up on all the rules. We can see there are problems in plain capitalism, okay, without morals and things like that. There are definitely problems, and so we're going to talk about those solutions so people don't go towards anarchy and things like that, which is not actually practical. Okay, so I've got a couple of verses. I'm not going to read them. I'm just going to outline what these verses of the Quran basically say. I'm not sure what the best order is, but basically this verse of the Quran is saying trade, which is the exchange of privately owned things, okay, is not bad. And who can argue with that? Like, what's inherently bad about giving stuff? Like, I've got some stuff, you give me some of your money, and we keep swapping stuff like that, right? How can you say anything like that is bad? In fact, it encourages us to work and make good things, etc. Okay, but the thing that gives capitalism a bad name, and we don't realize it because we think it's part of capitalism, is interest. Okay, so interest is a really interesting thing. It's actually banned or forbidden, I should say, by all the Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, but only Muslims really take that seriously. The Jews half take it seriously. What they say is that it's bad to give interest between Jews, but non-Jews, no problem. And I've asked Jews about it. You can check my videos where I've asked a Jew, at least one Jew, probably more than one Jew about this. Sounds terrible, isn't it? It's like you can selling drugs to other Jews is bad, but selling your drugs to non-Jews, that's fine. Yeah, that's sort of, I'd say that's a wrong attitude. I don't think that's part of the real teachings of Judaism. But anyway, so it's really dangerous, and there are many reasons why it's dangerous. But in short, one reason is the kind of reason that people appreciate in this little conversation is that it essentially robs the poor to give to the rich. Okay, because the poor basically give interest, the rich get interest is a short version. Okay, also people have this thing where they say money, which is the method which enables trade, is bad. Okay, money is technology. Okay, it didn't always exist, and we're slowly probably moving towards cryptocurrency because it's a bit faster. I don't need bits of paper anymore. We've already gone paperless largely, not here in Jordan, but many other countries. And but even that kind of money is very slow moving through banks. So cryptocurrency is a lot faster, more independent, less, less controlled by other people. So anyway, it's just different kinds of technology to help transfer goods between people. Otherwise, you'd have to buy microchips with carrots, and I say, I don't like those carrots, they're half off, whatever. Very complicated, causes a lot of problems. So you need technology of money to make our modern lives possible. So you want a phone? Well, a phone is made up of so many different parts, and that's a lot of trade. Yeah, and it won't be possible with ancient methods of trade. So you have to forget technology, forget modern life if you don't want money. Of course, money can be made the wrong way, and that's often it happens in systems where you have interest-dependent economies. Okay, so interest-dependent economies are weird economies where people borrow money they can't pay back, and then the greedy banks want to give more money because they're not really going to get all their money back, right, anytime soon. And so they print fake money. So that's when the technology is just wrong. It's not really technology, it's fake stuff. It's like a crap product called, it's not real money. It should be based on, there should be a limited amount of the currency depending on how much wealth you really have, real value like the gold standard. So so a lot of things can be misused, and interest is the heart of probably most of the problems you face with capitalism, but most people don't realize it because they think it's part of capitalism. But why should interest-based lending be part of capitalism? There's no reason for it. Okay, capitalism is just trading stuff. It should be, but even that, just trading stuff, is not good enough by itself. We'll talk about that in a minute. And in their wealth, so here's another verse of the Quran that talks about protection, basically, for everyone. Ready? And in their wealth was a share of for one who asked for help. Oh, no, it's another verse. I didn't think about this one. Okay. So basically, this verse of the Quran is talking about the right, the right to wealth because God is the creator of wealth and we are all God's children, but sometimes God tests us by giving some of us more wealth than the others and allowing poverty to exist unless we do something about it, right? I say sometimes, it's actually quite natural in many ways. And so wealth is a trust, because if you're religious, you realize everything comes from God. And a lot of creative people, entrepreneurs and things understand that ideas are hit and miss. There's a lot of luck. You put in effort. I'm not saying there's no effort, but there's a lot of luck as well. Let's say the owners of Google. There's one guy who came up with Google, and there's another guy who just worked with him because his best mate. And he had a dream, and he had a really weird dream, and he just followed his dream. So I would call that inspiration or kind of revelation from God. Okay, and it's not a new thing. The Eureka thing, was it Archimedes? He came up with Eureka. Many ideas are inspired by God. So, and there's really great TED talk that I love about it, about how we're inspired by the Eat, Pray, Love lady. I can't remember her name. So do check that out. Eat, Pray, Love, TED talk. Yeah. So and she talks about like how it's really bad to think meritocracy is all your work. It's a very stressful way of living your life, and it gets a lot of let's say creative people to kill themselves, right? So just this meritocracy, this everything depends on me sort of attitude is really bad for people's mental health. And so there's a lot of reasons not to agree with meritocracy. It's quite simple to prove that it's not right, but also it's not good for us either. Okay, so wealth is a trust, right? So you get money, and quite frankly, you won't be happy if you just keep it to yourself. You actually I've talked about this, but I haven't linked it in this document. By the way, this document is in the description. But I often give another TED talk which talks about how to buy happiness. And you don't buy happiness just by buying stuff for yourself. In fact, you buy stuff for other people, because that's just how we're built. And the more us human beings understand how we're really built, what really makes us happy, the better for us. And that is basically buy stuff for other people. Okay. Just having stuff for yourself. This is an experiment that the West is still indulging in, and we're just becoming more lonely and miserable with our stuff. Yeah. So it doesn't make us happy by just having the stuff. Be more social. Share it with other people, and then you have way more fun. Okay. As the rich. Yeah, so this verse is not saying that the rich must give X amount. They might just employ more people, for example, stuff like that. So the rich are not told they're bad. That's not sensible either. Okay, it's that they have made some effort. They become specialists. They understand how to use that wealth and manage it, and they've been told by God, share it in the way you consider best, okay, between you and God, sort of thing. A lot of wisdom there. Oh, it's not correct. Price's law. Okay, so as I was saying before, maybe that inequality is actually natural. People don't like this idea, but inequality is natural. It's natural that a lot of people will just give up because, okay, first of all, it's the wrong belief. It's so wrong to think that that it's easy to make wealth. It's really hard. Okay, people like Elon Musk sleep in their factories and stuff like that. Stuff like most people won't do. right? So there is some truth, or there's something right about meritocracy, but it's not entirely right. Okay. So Price's law says 50% of useful work is done by a square root of the population. If you take 1 million people, then the square root of that is 1,000. So 50% of all the useful work done by 1 million people is just done by 1,000 people. That's like 0.1%. Okay. The more people you have in a population, the more people are going to sit back and enjoy the ride and let other people do the hard work. That's one way of looking at it. One reason why Price's law works. And you get like, it's because you can, right? It's quite natural if you can sit back, and maybe there's this government system where you get money for doing nothing. Let's just say, I'm not saying you shouldn't have any benefit system, whatever, but if you have that opportunity, a lot of people will, because they won't see the purpose of working hard and stuff like that, or they just get depressed and whatever the reason is, right? And then let's go back on this idea. Should there be a benefit system, a sort of socialism? Well, there should be the basic needs met. We have to be careful not to give too much, otherwise it makes people lazy. So in the Quran, it talks about the God has given enough to provide for your basic needs like food, clothes, which is specifically food, clothing, water, and shelter. Okay. And I think it's quite reasonable to believe that that's possible. For example, shelter makes sense because we're using about 5% of the world's landmass. Most of us are living in big cities, which is like 3% of the world's landmass. So there's definitely lots of space. And there's actually lots of food. Lots of food gets wasted all the time. Anyway, and why is this really important? Because it protects. Ooh, so what's his name? Just there. I can just see the message. Alavari is gonna not be able to make it. Okay, that's cool. It's all right. There's value in this kind of monologue stuff, maybe, rather than sometimes I feel like we get stuck in stuff that's not really important, or we get distracted from useful discussion when you're debating. So maybe this monologue is great. Maybe I'll get somebody to join. Let's do an invite. Present. Where's the invite? If somebody's interested, they can tell me if they agree, disagree, whatever. I'll put it here. And if you're not watching it live, you can always disagree in the comments. I do check out comments all the time. I can see there's 2 people watching live. Okay, so yeah, you need to protect from capitalistic slavery, the slavery of low wages, something like you might get in like Amazon, where you're not even allowed to go to the toilet, you have to pee in a bottle and stuff like crazy stuff like that. It's very easy to abuse people, where if everybody's giving low wages, then people don't have any choice but to go for low wages. I'm not saying that's entirely true, because there's some people who manage to gain higher skills, but some people are immigrants, for example, or people are immigrants are even invited to come, and then they're stuck with doing really low paid jobs and treated like slaves. So apparently there's more slavery now than ever before. So I forget why that's true, but yeah, who knows? And then there's this argument. I'm trying to round things off, because so you might say, hard luck, poor people. It's just the way it is. Although I've kind of argued against that. It doesn't really make people happy in general. But there's something we don't realize a lot of the time, especially when we're really thinking selfishly, and that is we actually depend on poor people. And you wouldn't think that. A lot of people think poor people are disposable, but especially in England, when we had the coronavirus, we kind of realized that was wrong. There was this clap for heroes, and the heroes were dustbin men and the nurses, and they're really poor and downtrodden people, and we kind of realized, and we were clapping for them. The whole streets would come out, because if the dustbin men, the trash men, whatever you call them in America and the US, didn't do their jobs. We have disease and everything would just stand still. Everybody's sick. It would be, yeah. So you really need all these poor people to do their jobs to keep society going. Same with like nurses who are paid hardly anything in the UK, at least. It's a really tough job, and you can't just depend on doctors. Doctors kind of like do the high level stuff, but you need a lot of nurses just to keep the hospitals going, clean, and all that kind of stuff. I don't really know the details of that, but I'm sure they're necessary. Okay, so yeah, and so then after that it moves on to something else, I think. Yep. So when I say something else, it's part of my happiness course, and I've just added something to the top to kind of summarize this little topic. Is capitalism fair? I mean, is capitalism bad? And to summarize, capitalism is not good or bad by itself. It depends on how you implement it. Like if you think capitalism must involve interest, then it's going to be bad. There are lots of bad things that happen because of interest. Like I said, it robs the poor to give to the rich. It's like a reverse Robin Hood, I call it, if you know what Robin Hood is or who that is. But it's not bad either. It's essential because it's the only practical voting system to decide who should get what, right? And it generally allows more able people to get more stuff, but of course it can be abused, right? Do you think prostitution is good? Most people would disagree that. But most people would, well, a lot of people would say prostitution is bad, although they might use prostitutes and all that kind of stuff, right? It's bad to sexually abuse people and all this kind of stuff, right? So you do need some rules, and I've talked about the rules. I don't say just generally have rules. There are basic rules so that people aren't forced into things like prostitution by giving people all their basic needs so they can choose to take a job or not, but yet they're not so comfortable that they say, oh, I'm just going to live on a bare minimum because we like to have a bit more, right? So that's it, really. Yeah, I suppose I've already talked about why people like to complain about capitalism. I would say it's not very sensible to complain about capitalism. I talked about the alternatives like communism, which has never worked, anarchy, which nobody really believes in. It's like no rules, really? You think human beings that would just behave? Like, do you really see that happening in the streets? Like, imagine there are no rules on the cars, like when you're driving. That's just dangerous. It literally is a dangerous idea. But people who can't, they don't, I would say they're not just bad intention when they say we want anarchy. First, there are people who just like to complain and they feel a sense of, what's the word? A cause. They want a cause. All human beings want a cause, and they can't quite figure out what is better than capitalism, but they see a lot of bad things happening because of capitalism. So they feel like, empowered by saying, by fighting against this, what they see is bad stuff happening, but they haven't really understood what the problem is. And maybe if you are an anarchist or you just really hate capitalism, fair enough, I can see why you might hate capitalism. Like we can see in this picture, it's not a very pleasant sight, it's not very kind, etc. And it doesn't work either, right? You're going to destabilize society, certainly, just like the picture says. So you can see that, but just getting rid of capitalism is like, as they say in England, maybe throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like just throwing out everything is a really bad idea. Just understand what works and what doesn't work, and keep the good bits, throw out the bad bits, and hopefully, if you understood this video, you might know the difference. Thank you for listening. Do comment in the non-live comments because I'm going to stop the stream. Thank you very much for listening.